Yahuwah, Yahuwah. So, Mashpaka, continuing on into my YouTube family, this is part 2 of the Shabbat message. This will be part 2. If you haven't watched part 1 of this Shabbat message, stop right now and go back, YouTube family, and begin at part 1. Begin at part 1. Don't begin here. Begin at part 1. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. Turn Mashpaka to Ishayahu, Isaiah the 53rd chapter. 53rd chapter. And we're continuing in the teaching entitled, Let's Talk About Fruit. Humility is the key to all things. Let's talk about fruit. Humility is the key to all things. Indeed, humility is the key to our salvation, to our Yeshua. Humility is the foundation. This is what Yahusha showed us. He showed us, this was the example that he showed us. He showed us humility because, as Abba spoke to us in the first part of this teaching, that if we don't operate in humility, then we can't obey him. And he obeyed every word that came from the Father's mouth. He obeyed everything. He obeyed everything, even to death on the stake. He obeyed everything, and so thus he humbled himself. To obey means to submit. To submit means to what? It means to humble ourselves. And so if we don't humble ourselves, we not only do not have the fruit of the Ruach, but we will not inherit eternal life. Because out of the Father's mouth himself, he has declared, Baruch are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. For they shall inherit the earth. And so this is the way that Yahusha showed us. This is the way. It's the key to all things. The key to Torah is humility. The key to obeying Torah is humility. And if we don't submit and obey Torah, he's not going to send his Ruach. He sends his Ruach in accordance with the 5th chapter of Acts, verse 32. He sends his Ruach to those who obey him. To those who obey Torah. Barak Yahuwah. So looking now at Ishayahu, Isaiah, the 53rd chapter, verse 1 through 7, it reads here, Who has believed our report, and to whom was the arm of Yahuwah revealed? For he grew up before him as a tender plant, and as a root out of a dry ground. He has no form of splendor that we should look upon him, nor appearance that we should desire him. Despised and rejected by men, a man of pains and knowing sickness, and as one from whom the face is hidden, being despised, and we did not consider him. Truly, he has borne our sicknesses and carried our pains. Yet we reckon him smitten, stricken by Elohim, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our crookedness. The chastisement for our shalom was upon him, and by his stripes we were healed. And by his stripes we were healed. It reads here that he had no form or splendor that we should look upon him, nor appearance that we should desire him. You see, he came as a lowly servant. He came as a lowly servant. You see, amongst our people, the sovereigns were handsome men. They were tall and handsome men. But he didn't have that kind of appearance. He came as a lowly servant. He came wearing the clothing of a servant. Yahuwah himself came wearing the clothing of a servant. And he didn't even have a handsome appearance. He came as a servant, as a carpenter, as a servant. And so this is the primary reason why the Pharisees rejected him. They knew that Yahuwah was coming. They knew that the Hamashiach was coming. They knew that Emmanuel, Yahuwah with us, Elohim with us, was coming. But they were expecting a sovereign, because all of the sovereigns of Yashar were handsome men. They were tall, handsome men, except Dawood. He wasn't tall at all, but he was a handsome man. He was a handsome man. He was, by this description, Yahusha wasn't handsome. He wasn't handsome at all. Thus, he didn't fit the description of a sovereign. And so they rejected him as sovereign. They rejected him as being Yahuwah in flesh because he didn't look the part. Because he didn't look the part. He came to show them the way. He came to show them that the way is to humble yourself and to be a servant. But they were too preoccupied with having the best places at the table. They were too preoccupied with being called Rabbi, a great teacher. They were too preoccupied with being exalted amongst men, with receiving the praises of men. They were too exalted with themselves to understand this was Yahuwah in flesh, who came as a lowly servant to teach you that this is the way, that you too must humble yourself as he humbled himself as a humble servant. This is the only way to salvation. Why? Why is this the only way to salvation? Because this is the judgment. This is the judgment that he's pronounced over us. Adam fell. When he fell from being ruler over the earth, and he fell to becoming a servant. He was cast down to the position of a servant. He then had to serve Hashatan. Hashatan became his master. Hashatan became his master, and he became servant. And so this is the judgment. This is the judgment. And when we submit to the judgment and humble ourselves as lowly servants, we are walking out our salvation. We are working out our Yeshua with reverence and trembling. With reverence and trembling. We have been resorted to servants because Adam disobeyed the voice of Yahuwah and obeyed the voice of Hashatan. Therefore, the only way for us to be re-exalted to our throne, to the place that we were previously at, is through now obeying the judgment, which is to walk as a servant, which is to walk as a lowly servant in the way that Yahusha showed us. In the way that Yahusha showed us. Continuing reading this chapter, we all like sheep went astray, each one of us having turned to his own way. And Yahuwah has laid on him the crookedness of us all. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, but he did not open his mouth. He did not open his mouth. He was led as a lamb to the slaughter. He was led as a lamb to the slaughter. We're going to talk more about this. He was led as a lamb to the slaughter. And as a sheep before his shearers, he is silent. But he did not open his mouth. He did not open his mouth. This is the characteristic of a lamb. A lamb will go right up to its master and won't yelp a sound as he's being offered. He's that gentle. He's that meek. He is that lowly. This is what a lamb will do. This is what a lamb will do. You see? This is what a lamb would do. And like a lamb, he was silent. And he did not even open his mouth. And he has shown us the way. If we have the discernment to see, if we have the eyes to see and the ears to hear and a mind to understand, he has shown us the way. That the way to Yeshua is through humility. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. Zephaniah, the 2nd chapter. Zephaniah, the 2nd chapter. Zephaniah, the 2nd chapter. Zephaniah, the 2nd chapter. Verse 1 through 3. Verse 1 through 3. Beginning at verse 1. Gather together, O nation without shame. Yashua is a puffed up nation. It's a stiff-necked nation, and they don't understand that meekness is the way. People are puffed up with knowledge. Knowledge can't save us. Knowledge cannot save us. puffed up with knowledge, puffed up with themselves, not understanding that Abba Yahuwah is resisting them. He is not in them. We must humble ourselves. We must humble ourselves and align ourselves with the judgment, which is to become servants. Servants, because Adam, our father, sold us into servitude to Hashatan. And so we must comply with the judgment. We must become servants before he will exalt us back to the throne. Zephaniah, the 2nd chapter, verse 1 through 3. Gather together, O nation, without shame before the law gives birth. The day shall pass on like chaff. Before the burning wrath of Yahuwah comes upon you. Before the day of wrath of Yahuwah comes upon you. Listen, seek Yahuwah, all you meek ones of the earth. Seek Yahuwah, all you meek ones of the earth, you humble ones of the earth, who have done right ruling. Seek righteousness. Seek righteousness. Seek meekness. Seek meekness, if so be that you are hidden in the day of wrath of Yahuwah. Seek righteousness. Seek meekness, if so be that you are hidden in the day of wrath of Yahuwah. Indeed, let's talk about fruit. Let's talk about fruit. Humility is the key to all things. Indeed, humility is the foundation of the fruit of the root. The fruit of the root is laid upon the foundation of humility. This is Yahuwah. This is who he is. If we don't operate in this fruit, we don't belong to him. He is not in us. He is not in us. Barak Yahuwah. 2 Chronicles, the 16th chapter. 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 His people perish for lack of knowledge. Not the lack of the knowledge that they think they have, but the lack of the knowledge of him. If you know him, you'll understand that he is meek and that he is humble. And that as his children, we are to operate in the same way. If you truly know him. If you truly know him. If you don't, you'll operate like your father, Hashatan, and operate in pride. And operate in pride and arrogance. And this is what caused him to be cast out. Because pride overcame him. It destroyed him from the inside out. And he was cast out. And his children operate in pride. His children operate in pride. But the children of Yahuwah operate in meekness and humility. Indeed, let's talk about fruit. Let's talk about fruit. Humility is the key to all things. Humility is the key to all things. 2 Chronicles 16. 2 Chronicles, the 16th chapter. 2 Chronicles, the 16th chapter, verse 1 through 9. And bear with me, because I lost my place as I was plugging my iPad up. 2 Chronicles, the 16th chapter, verse 1 through 9, beginning at verse 1. In the 36th year of the reign of Asa, Baasha, the sovereign of Yasha'al, came up against Yahudah and built Ramah to prevent anyone going out or coming in to Asa, sovereign of Yahudah. And Asa brought silver and gold from the treasuries of the house of Yahuwah and of the sovereign's house, and sent to Ben-Hadad, sovereign of Aram, who dwelt in Damascus, saying, let there be a covenant between you and me, as there was between my father and your father. See, I have sent you silver and gold. Come, break your covenant with Baasha, sovereign of Yasha'al, so that he withdraws from me. And Ben-Hadad listened to sovereign Asa, and sent the commanders of his armies against the cities of Yasha'al. And they struck Iyun and Dan and Abal Ma'im, and all the storage cities of Naphtali. And it came to be, when Baasha heard it, that he stopped building Ramah and ceased his work. Then Asa the sovereign brought all Yehudah, and they took away the stones and timber of Ramah, which Baasha used for building. And with them he built Gaba and Matzpah and Mitzpah. And at that time, Canaani, the seer, came to Asa, sovereign of Yehudah, and said to him, because you have relied on the sovereign of Aram and have not relied on Yahuwah your Elohim, therefore the army of the sovereign of Aram have escaped from your hand. Where the Cushi and the Lubim, were the Cushi and the Lubim not a mighty army with very many chariots and horsemen? And because you relied on Yahuwah, he gave them into your hand. For the eyes of Yahuwah diligently search throughout all the earth. For the eyes of Yahuwah diligently search throughout all the earth to show himself to be strong on behalf of those whose heart is perfect to him. This word perfect is the Abari Shalom. Shalom. It should sound familiar because it's part of the fruit of the root. It's part of the fruit of the root, which has its foundation planted in humility. Barak Yahuwah. To show himself to be strong on behalf of those whose heart is perfect. Shalom to him. You have acted foolishly in this, so from now on you shall have battles. And so he says here, the eyes of Yahuwah goes to and fro, looking for a heart which is perfect towards him, which is shalom towards him. In other words, his eyes go to and fro, looking for a humble heart, looking for a meek and humble heart, a meek and humble heart. Indeed, shalom, shin lamed mam, means complete, or figuratively, especially friendly. Used, it also means, it says here, peaceable, but it also means quiet. Shalom means quiet. So the eyes of Yahuwah go to and fro, looking for a heart that's perfect towards him. He looks for a shalom-filled heart. He looks for a humble heart. He looks for a quiet heart. A quiet heart, because shalom also means quiet. It also means quiet. Let's look at some synonyms now for quiet. Let's look at some synonyms for quiet. Listen. Arcadian, calm, hushed, peaceful, or shalom, placid, restful, serene, still, stilly, tranquil. Let's look at some words that are related to quiet. Listen, noiseless, silent, soundless, mute, speechless, wordless, dead, motionless, quiescent, muffed, muted, quieted, dull. Listen here, gentle. To be quiet means to be gentle. It means to be gentle. What does gentle mean? Having or showing a mild, kind, or tender temperament or character. Let's look at some synonyms for gentle. Indeed, you will find gentle in the fruit of the root. Indeed, in the fruit of the root, it is all, again, based on the foundation of humility. Let's look deeper into gentle. Let's look at some synonyms. It means kind, kindly, tender, benign, humane, lenient, compassionate, forgiving. You will find compassionate in the fruit of the root. Forgiving. You will find forbearing. Patient. Forbearing means patient. You will find patience in the fruit of the root. All of this are synonyms for gentle. And this is the heart that Yahuwah looks for. This is what he looks for. He looks for a meek and humble person. If you haven't gotten this yet. Sympathetic, considerate, understanding, clement, compassionate, benevolent, kind-hearted. All of this is related to gentle, tender-hearted, good-natured, sweet-tempered, loving, mild, soft, quiet, shy, demure, modest, humble. All of this is related to gentle. Indeed, this is the fruit of the root. It's all laid upon the foundation of humility. Humility is the way. It's the only way. It is the only way that we are going to inherit the earth. Humble, retiring, unassuming, still, tranquil, peaceful, peaceable, pacific, placid, serene, reposeful, reverent, underline that one, reverent. Indeed, if you're not meek and mild, you can't be reverent. You can't be reverent. You can't reverence Yahuwah if you're not meek and mild. The humble, the proud don't reverence him. They don't reverence him, but the meek do. But the meek do. Thus reverence is related to gentle and quiet and humble. It means the same thing. To be humble is to be reverent. To be meek and to be mild. Reverent, meek, and docile. Reverent, meek, and docile. So now, let's look here at synonyms for submission. For submission. Let's look at synonyms for submission. Compliance, capitulation, resignation, acquiescent, appeasement, assent, bowing, defeatism, defense, difference, docility. We just read docile here, and one of the synonyms for gentle. For gentle. So we see that submission also has to do with being gentle and meek and mild and docile and reverent. Submission also has to do with this. Indeed, this is what obedience is. It is submission. If we're not humble and meek, then there's no way for us to obey, because we have to submit to obey. Thus, if we don't obey, we're not going to inherit. And thus, if we're not meek and mild and gentle and reverent and docile, we're not going to inherit. Listen here. Difference, docility, humbleness. All of these are synonyms for submission. Humbleness, humility, malleability, meekness, and non-resistance. And so this is the foundation of all things. Indeed, let's talk about fruit. Humility is the key to all things. It is the key to all things. Let's look at Tahalim, Psalm 75. Tahalim, Psalm 75. Tahalim of Psalms 75. Tahalim of Psalms 75. Psalm 75, verse 1 through 5. We shall give thanks to you, O Elohim. We shall give thanks. And your name is near. Your wonders shall be declared. When I seize the appointed time, it is I who judge in uprightness. The earth and all its inhabitants are melted. It is I who set its columns firm. Salah. I said to the boasters, do not boast. And to the wrong, do not lift up the horn. Do not lift up your horn on high. You speak with a stiff neck. You speak with a stiff neck. Proverbs 27. Proverbs 27. Proverbs 27, verse 1 and 2. Proverbs 27, verse 1 and 2. As usual, Abba's building a house. He's building a house, but as usual, he starts at a foundation. He's building a house, but he's making the claim. He is making the case that we're going to talk about fruit on this day, and that humility is the key to all things. Proverbs 27, verse 1 and 2. Do not boast of tomorrow, for you do not know what a day brings forth. Let another man praise you. Let another man praise you, and not your own mouth, a stranger, and not your own lips. Indeed, we don't praise our own selves. We don't exalt our own selves. If we are indeed his, if we indeed belong to him, if we indeed are sheep, if we indeed are sheep, then we ought to have the characteristics of a sheep, which is meek and which is mild and which is gentle. We ought to have the characteristic of a sheep. A sheep is a very obedient animal. He is a very obedient animal. He is submissive. He is submissive. And so indeed, if we are indeed sheep, we ought to have the characteristic of a sheep. Barak Yahuwah. And not boast in ourselves, but let another man boast. Let another man exalt us. Let another man boast in us. Barak Yahuwah. James 4, chapter 10. James 4, chapter 10. This is rampant in the house of Yasha'al. This is rampant. I've seen people give esteem to men, and instead of that man or that person giving esteem to Yahuwah, they would turn around and say thank you. They would simply turn around and say thank you. Rather than giving Yahuwah the esteem, they would simply turn around and say thank you and receive the esteem of Elohim. You must understand, we must understand that Elohim will share his esteem with none other. We talked about this on the fourth day. Yahuwah will share his esteem with none other. We dare not steal his esteem. We dare not steal his esteem. We are called to be sheep. We are called to be meek, lowly, meek, gentle, submissive sheep, and to give him all the esteem, to give him all the praise, to give him all of the honor. We do not allow men to esteem us. We turn that right back around and give him the esteem. We are not to be like Hashatan, who was guilty of illegal trafficking. Instead of diverting the traffic of praise to Yahuwah, he instead received the praise for himself, and his heart became puffed up. And he became puffed up, and pride consumed him from the inside out, to the point that he tried to exalt his throne above Yahuwah al-Ayyum. And his children do the same. His children do the same. Instead of operating in gentleness and meekness, his children will take the esteem for themselves. His children look for a platform. His children look to be known. His children look for importance. But Yahuwah's children look to be meek and humble and mild. Barak Yahuwah. Indeed, let's talk about fruit. Let's talk about fruit. Humility is the key to all things. Humility is the key to all things. James, Yaqub, chapter 4, verse 10. Humble yourselves in the sight of the master, and he shall lift you up. And he shall lift you up. Indeed, this is the way. This is the way. Do you not understand that Torah is the way, the truth, and the life? Do you not understand that? Do you understand that Torah, that if we obey Torah, that we will live by it? That we will live by it? Do you not understand that in order to obey Torah, that we must humble ourselves to submit to it? And if we submit to it, he will lift us up. He will lift us up. In the end, he will exalt us, as in the example of Yahushua HaMashiach, who humbled himself and then was lifted up, who was exalted. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. 1 Peter chapter 5. 1 Peter, Kapha Alaf, chapter 5. 1 Peter, Kapha Alaf, chapter 5, verse 1 through 6. Verse 1 through 6. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 1 through 6. Indeed, we're talking about fruit. Let's talk about fruit. Let's talk about fruit. Humility is the key to all things. Humility is the pathway. It's the pathway to our Yeshua. It is the pathway to salvation. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 1 through 6. Therefore, as a fellow elder and a witness of the sufferings of Mashiach, and also a sharer of the esteem that is to be revealed, I appeal to the elders among you, shepherd the flock of Elohim, which is among you, serving as overseers, not by compulsion, but voluntarily, not out of greed for filthy gain, but eagerly, neither as being masters over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, you shall receive the never-fading crown of esteem. In the same way, you younger ones, be subject to elders. Be subject to elders. Be subject to elders. Submission. This is humility. This is humility. This is humility. If you can't submit, there's no humility in you. I don't care whether or not that is being in subjection to elders, or if that is Naisha being in subjection to your Aish. If you can't submit, you don't have any humility in you. And if you don't have any humility in you, then you are not going to inherit the earth. These are not my words. This is in the text. Don't get mad at me. Get mad at Yahuwah. These are his words. These are his words. And he himself came to show us the way. He himself came to show us the way. Listen, and gird yourselves with humility towards one another. And gird yourselves with humility towards one another. For Elohim resists the proud, but gives favor to the humble. Humble yourselves then under the mighty hand of Elohim, so that what? So that he exalts you in due time. So that he exalts you in due time. Because when we humble ourselves as servants, we are now in submission not only to the judgment, which is Torah, which is the judgment is contained in Torah. Not only are we in submission to the judgment, but now we are in submission to Torah. We are in submission to the very voice of Yahuwah. And it is not those who are hearers of the Torah who are declared righteous, but the doers of the Torah who are declared righteous. Not the hearers, but the doers of Torah who are declared righteous. And if we are doers of Torah, then we are going to be declared righteous. We are going to be exalted, and we are going to be placed back on our thrones. But the way to being exalted back to the thrones, our original place, is through submission. It's through humility. It's through the path that Yahushua HaMashiach showed us. Yahuchanan, or John, the 13th chapter. John, the 13th chapter. Yahuchanan, John, the 13th chapter. Yahuchanan, John, the 13th chapter. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. Verses 20 through 35. Verses 20 through 35. Beginning at verse 20. Truly, truly, I say to you, he who receives whomever I send receives me. And he who receives me receives him who sent me. When Yahushua had said this, he was troubled in Ruach, and witnessed and said, Truly, truly, I say to you, one of you shall deliver me up. The taught ones looked at one another, doubting of whom he spoke. And one of his taught ones, whom Yahushua loved, was reclining on the bosom of Yahushua. Why does it say one of the taught ones whom Yahushua loved? Do you not know that it takes a meek and humble man to lay on the bosom of another man? Yes, it does. Yes, it does. A man that's prideful and puffed up is not going to lay his head on the bosom of another man. He's not going to do it. But a meek and humble and gentle lamb of a man will lay his head on the bosom of another man. And this is Yahuchanan, as we see in this example. And what does the text say? this is the one he loved. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. The text says that this is the one he loved, because more than likely, he was the most humble of all of them. It says here, you can't ignore anything in the text. It says here, and the one whom he loved was reclining on his bosom. Now there are many men in this bosom that would not lay their heads on the bosom of another man. You won't do it. Your pride would get in the way. Your manhood would get in the way. And you would think there's something wrong with laying your head on the bosom of your brother. John did it. YAHUAH'S did it because he was gentle and meek as a lamb. And the text says that this is the one that Yahushua loved. This is the one that Yahushua loved. When Yahushua had said this, and he was troubled and ruke and witnessed, and said, truly, truly, I say to you, one of you shall deliver me up. The taught ones looked at one another, doubting of whom he spoke. And one of his taught ones, whom Yahushua loved, was reclining on the bosom of Yahuwah. Shimon Kapha then motioned to him to ask, who is it? Who is it was of whom he spoke? And leaning back on the breast of Yahushua, he said to him, Master, who is it? Now, he leaned on the breast of Yahushua in order to get close to his ear, because he wanted to whisper something in his ear. He leaned on his breast in order to get close to his ear, but it was YAHUAH'S who was found reclining on his breast, who was found reclining on his bosom, and whom the text declares this is the one whom Yahushua loved. Why does it say that? Because the previous text that we read said that the eyes of Yahuwah go to and fro, looking across the whole of the earth, looking for a heart which is perfect towards him. Shalom, gentle, quiet, humble. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. You can't ignore any of the text. You can't ignore any of the text. Shimon Kapha then motioned to him to ask who it was of whom he spoke. And leaning back on the breast of Yahushua, he said to him, Master, who is it? Yahushua answered, it is he to whom I shall give a piece of bread when I have dipped it. And having dipped the bread, he gave it to Yahudah from Kari-Uf, son of Shamma'un. And after the piece of bread, Satan entered into him. Yahushua therefore said to him, what you do, do it quickly. But no one at the table knew why he said this to him. For some were supposing because Yahudah had the bag that Yahushua was saying to him, buy what we need for the festival, or that he should give somewhat to the poor. So having received the piece of bread, he then went out straightway, and it was night. When therefore he went out, Yahushua said, now the son of Adam hath been esteemed, and Elohim has been esteemed in him. If Elohim has been esteemed in him, Elohim shall also esteem him in himself, and straightway esteem him. Little children, little children, little children. Why did he call them little children? Because they were all meek and humble. They were all meek and humble. But evidence shows that YAHUAH'S was perhaps more humble than any of them. Was perhaps more humble than any of them. Thus the text says, yes it does, the text says that YAHUAH'S was the one he loved. Was the one he loved. Indeed, if we are not as little children, as meek and humble little children, we by no means will enter into the reign. Little children, yet a little while I am with you. You shall seek me. And as I said to the Yahudim, where I am going, you are unable to come. I now also say to you, a renewed command I give to you. A renewed command I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you. What is the fruit of the root? This is also one of the fruit. This is also fruit of the root, love. What is love? Love is also based in humility. If you don't have meekness and humility in you, you can't love nobody. You can't love nobody because love suffers long. Love will cause you to serve somebody. Love will cause you to submit. Love will cause you to do things that you don't want to do. Love will cause you to go places that you don't want to go. See, you can't love if you're not meek and humble. You can't love if you don't have meekness and humility in you. It's impossible. It's impossible. You see, we've talked about this. Love is an action word. It's not lip service. It is action word. Love, true ahava, which is a noun, manifest. It manifests in action. It manifests in something that we can touch. True ahava will cause you to submit and will cause you to humble yourself. Aisha, you cannot say that you love your husband if you don't submit to him. You're a liar. You're a liar. If you don't submit to him, you don't love him. You don't love him. You don't. No, you don't. And so love, this renewed command I give you, that you love one another. Love is not a word. It's action. It's action. And this is a renewed command. And it is founded and laid upon the foundation of humility. Indeed, we cannot love without meekness and humility being in us. Thus, love is synonymous with meekness and humility and gentleness and submission. It is synonymous with it. It is synonymous with it. Reading here, a renewed command I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this shall I know. Listen. By this shall I know. By this shall all know that you are my taught ones, if you have love for one another. By this shall all know that you are my taught ones, if you have love for one another. In other words, by this they will know you. By your fruit. By your fruit. By the fruit of the root. Indeed, let's talk about fruit. Let's talk about fruit. Let's talk about fruit. Let's talk about fruit. Humility is the key to all things. It is the key to all things. This is the fruit. This is the fruit. You can't love if you don't have meekness and humility in you. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. Thank you, Abba. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. Turn to Luke chapter 10. Luke chapter 10. Turn to Luke chapter 10. Oh, we will know them by their fruit. Last week we talked about the fruit of repentance. Was it the week before last? I can't remember. One of these weeks we talked about the fruit of repentance. We talked about the fruit of repentance, but you've got, I think that was the week before, the Shabbat before last, when we talked about the fruit of repentance. But if you don't have meekness and humility, you don't have the fruit of repentance, because the fruit of repentance, this takes submission. In order to obey, you got to submit. In order to repent, repentance, it alludes to obedience. It alludes to obedience. And you have to submit to repent and obey. And so without meekness and humility, you can't even repent. You can't even repent. You can't even have the fruit of repentance without meekness and humility in you. This is the key to all things. This is the key to all things. Luke chapter 10, beginning at verse 25. And reading down through verse 42. And see, a certain one learned in the Torah stood up trying him and saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit everlasting life? And he said to him, what has been written in the Torah? What has been written in the Torah? Because in the text contains life. If we obey it, if we submit and obey it, we shall live. How do you read it? And he answered and said, you shall love Yahuwah, your Elohim, with all your heart and with all your being and with all your strength and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. Indeed, Abba just told you that you can't love without humility. You can't love Yahuwah without meekness and humility, because how do we show that we love Yahuwah? Through obedience to Torah. How do we show that we love our neighbor? Through obedience to Torah. And so obedience means to submit. It means to submit. And if we don't have meekness and humility, we are not going to submit. We are not going to love Yahuwah, And we're not going to love our neighbor, because indeed through meekness and humility, this is how we show that we love Yahuwah, and this is how we show that we love our neighbor, because through meekness and humility, we submit and obey. We submit and we obey. And so these commands, this command is one command. It is one command. They're not separate. This is one command that is all hinged upon and laid upon the foundation of humility. Of humility. You shall love Yahuwah, your Elohim, with all your heart and with all your being, with all your strength and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, you have answered rightly. Do this and you shall live. But he, wishing to declare himself righteous, said to Yahusha, and who is my neighbor? And who is my neighbor? And replying, Yahusha said, a certain man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and fell among robbers, who both stripping and beating him went away, leaving him half dead. And by a coincidence, a certain Kahan was going down that way. And when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. And likewise, a Luim also, when he came to the place and seeing, passed by on the other side. But a certain Shamaruni, journeying came upon him. And when he saw him, he had compassion on him, fruit of the root. And he went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. And having placed him on his own beast, he humbled himself, got down from off his beast, and put this injured man on his beast. Reading here again. And when he saw him, he had compassion on him. And he went to him and bandaged his wound, and pouring on oil and wine. And having placed him on his own beast, he brought him to an inn and looked after him. And going out on the next day, he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said to him, look after him. And whatever more you spend, I shall repay you when I return. Who then of these 3 do you think was neighbor to him who fell among robbers? Indeed, the one who showed himself to be neighborly. The one who loved his neighbor as he loved himself. The one who humbled himself, who operated in meekness and humility, and humbled himself and put this man on his beast and walked ahead of him. Oh, yes, he had to walk. If he put him on the beast, he had to step down and walk. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. He humbled himself and put the man on the beast. And thus, this one acted like a neighbor. This one fulfilled the commandment to love his neighbor as himself. Indeed, you can't love without humbling yourself. It is impossible for us to love without humbling ourselves. And so he said here, who then of these 3 do you think was neighbor to him who fell among robbers? And he said, he who showed compassion on him. Then Yahusha said to him, go and do likewise. Go and do likewise. In other words, go and operate in the same type of meekness and humility that this Shamaruni did, which is to operate in meekness and humility. Go and operate in the same way, and you shall gain life. And you shall gain life. Because why? Once again, the meek shall inherit the Yarats. The meek shall inherit the Yarats. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. Go and do likewise. And it came to be, as they went, they entered into a certain village, and a certain woman named Martha received them into her house. And she had a sister called Maryam, who also sat at the feet of Yahusha. Like a humble little girl, like a humble little child, like a humble little lamb laying at the feet of his master. So was Martha. So was Maryam laying at his feet, sitting at his feet, like a humble, gentle, innocent little child or lamb. And she had a sister called Maryam, who also sat at the feet of Yahusha, a grown woman, sitting at his feet like a child, sitting at his feet like a servant, sitting at his feet like a little obedient lamb, and heard his word. But Martha was distracted with much serving. And coming up, she said, Master, are you not concerned that my sister has left me to serve alone? Speak to her then to help me. And Yahusha answering said to her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and troubled about many matters, but only one is necessary. But only one is necessary. Which one is that? Sitting meekly at his feet, humbling ourselves, sitting meekly at his feet, being a meek and humble servant, being as a meek and lowly little child, and sitting at his feet. But only one is necessary. And Maryam has chosen the good portion, which shall not be taken from her. Which shall not be taken from her. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. Turn to Luke chapter 8. Turn to Luke chapter 8. Luke chapter 8. Turn to Luke chapter 8. Luke chapter 8, verse 43 through 48. Verse 43 through 48. And a woman having a flow of blood for 12 years, who having spent all her livelihood on physicians, was unable to be healed by any, came from behind and touched the tzitzit of his garment. If you know Torah, you understand that she wasn't supposed to touch him, and she knew that she wasn't supposed to touch him. And him being a Kahan in the order of Melchizedek, he also understood that she was not supposed to touch him. But how did he respond? And immediately her flow of blood stopped. And Yahusha said, who touched me? Who touched me? And when all denied it, Kapha and those with him said, Master, the crowds throng you and press upon you and say, who touched me? But Yahusha said, somebody did touch me, for I knew power went out from me. And the woman, seeing that she was not hidden, came trembling, came trembling, came trembling. She was afraid, she was trembling, because she knew that she had transgressed Torah. She knew that she had this flow of blood for 12 years and that she was supposed to be separated, that she was not supposed to touch anyone, that she was supposed to be without the camp. And she understanding that this is a special man, that this is a man of Yahuwah. And she understanding that she is not to touch anyone, especially a man of Yahuwah, with this flow of blood. She touched him. And when he turned around, she stood there trembling, afraid and trembling, not knowing what he was going to say, or what he was going to do, whether or not he was going to tell her that she was going to be kicked out of the congregation forever. She didn't know what he was going to tell her. So she stood there trembling because she knew that she wasn't supposed to touch him. She had touched the righteous man. She had touched someone who was clean and she was unclean. And she was trembling, not knowing what to expect. And falling down before him, she declared to him in the presence of all the people why she had touched him and how she was healed immediately. Listen to what the master said. Listen to what our humble master said. And he said to her, take courage, daughter. I could imagine that he spoke to her so tenderly, so kind and so tenderly and so compassionate, so as to calm her fears. So as to calm her fears, he spoke to her in a voice of meekness and humility and with compassion, so as to calm her fears, saying here, take courage, daughter. Your belief has healed you. Go in shalom. Go in shalom. Go in shalom. And so, if we do not walk as the Hamashiach walked, meek and lowly and gentle, this is the path that he has shown us. We will not only will we not be exalted, not only will we not be exalted. But we will not enter the reign. We will not enter the reign, because it is written, only the meek will inherit the earth. Only the meek will inherit the earth. I'm skipping now through some precepts, getting to the meat of the teaching, because Abba has already stated his case. So I'm skipping now through some precepts, and we're going to get to the meat of the teaching. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. Indeed, this is, let's talk about fruit. Let's talk about fruit. Humility is the key to all things. Humility is the key to all things. Indeed, turn to Matthew 7. Matthew chapter 7. We talked about this a couple of Shabbats ago. Matthew chapter 7. And we're going to read verses 16 through 23. Matthew chapter 7. And we're going to read verses 16 through 23. Beginning at verse 16, it reads, by their fruits you shall know them. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes, or figs from thistles? So every good tree yields good fruit. In other words, every good tree yields the fruit of obedience. Every good tree yields the fruit of repentance. Indeed, Abba has already made the case that without meekness and without humility, you cannot show the fruit of repentance. Because to obey means to submit. To repent means to turn from crime back to obedience. But unless you are meek and humble, you can't turn from disobedience back to obedience. You must have meekness and humility to submit. And so indeed, humility is the key to all things. And without it, we won't inherit. Reading on, so every good tree yields good fruit, but a rotten tree yields wicked fruit. A good tree is unable to yield wicked fruit, and a rotten tree to yield good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. So then, by their fruits you shall know them. Not everyone who says to me, Master, Master, shall enter into the reign of the Shamayim, but he who is doing the desire of my Father in the Shamayim. Indeed, to do the desire of the Father means what? Means to walk humbly before him. Means to walk humbly before him and obey him. To obey means to submit. To do the desire of the Father is to obey him. But we cannot obey him without submitting. And we cannot submit without having humility. Without having humility. And if we are not obeying, what are we doing? We're doing lawlessness. As it reads, many shall say to me in that day, Master, Master, have we not prophesied in your name, and cast out demons in your name, and done many mighty works in your name? And then I shall declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who work lawlessness. Indeed, the foundation of the fruit of the root is humility. It is the foundation of everything, obedience and love and everything. We cannot obey without submitting. We cannot obey without having meekness and humility. And if we're not operating in meekness and humility, not only are we not operating, are we operating in rotten fruit, but we're also not operating in the fruit of the root, and which means that we're not obeying, and now we're operating in lawlessness, which means that he will declare, I never knew you. I never knew you. And so indeed, if you're a Christian listening, on YouTube, yes, as we just read in this text, the lawless can also cast out devils. The lawless can also cast out devils. And all the time, many times in your Christian churches, they're not casting out devils in the name of Yahusha. They're casting out devil in the name of that demon, Jesus, Jesus. Indeed, it is our well-known knowledge and well-known understanding that a more powerful demon can cast out a less powerful demon. Yes, he can. Yes, he can. That's a false healing. That's called false lying signs and wonders. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But it reads here, though, the lawless, but there in Matthew 7, it says that there are those who are going to cast out devils in his name, yet still operate in lawlessness. Indeed, there are some who know his name. There are many in this season who know the name of Yahusha, who know the name of the Son, Yahusha, and may be casting out devils in the name of Yahusha, but are not operating in meekness and humility. Thus, they are still out of order. They are still operating in lawlessness because they are not operating in the fruit. They're not operating in fruit. Barak Yahuwah, Barak Yahuwah. And unless we're operating in this fruit, which is the fruit of meekness and humility, we will by no means enter into life. We will by no means enter into life. There are many who are casting out devils in these names, and they're boasting about it. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. I've heard them. They're boasting about it. They can't wait to make a video about it. They can't wait to get on Facebook or YouTube and boast about the devils that they say that they have cast out when they ain't cast out nothing. They can't cast out a coal. They are dirt. They are dirt vessels. They are worms. They can't cast out a coal. They ain't done nothing. But yet they boast that they cast out a devil or they cured something. They ain't done nothing. They are boasting and they're showing their fruits. They're showing their fruit. They're not operating in the fruit of humility. And thus says Yahuwah in this text in Matthew chapter 7, he is going to declare, I never knew you. You who work in lawlessness. Because only the meek are going to inherit the earth. Only the meek are going to inherit the earth. You can't obey me without meekness. You can't obey me without loving me. Indeed, you can't love without submitting. You can't love without operating in meekness and humility. So indeed, there are some, as the text declares, that are calling on the name of Yahusha, but are puffed up and prideful and boastful, boasting in what they claim that they are doing, not giving Yahuwah esteem, not operating in meekness and humility, boasting in their own knowledge, boasting in their own mighty one called knowledge, and they're not going to enter because only the meek shall inherit the earth. Only the meek shall inherit the earth. Barak Yahuwah reading again, some of them are not going to enter. Did not Yahuwah commonly called Kari Uf, did not Yahuwah also cast out devils? Yes, he did. Yes, he did. He went out with the 12. Yahuwah, who is sometimes called Judas, he cast out devils. He healed the sick. He raised the dead. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Because this is the command that Yahusha gave to the 12. He told them to go and raise the dead and heal the sick and cast out devils. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. And so Yahuwah, Judas also did it. He also cast out devils. But he operated in lawlessness and he was puffed up. He did not operate in meekness and humility. He also cast them out. So yes, many are going to cast out devils and heal the sick and perhaps raise the dead in the name and in the authority of Yahushua HaMashiach. But they're not operating in meekness and humility. And the text declares that only the meek shall inherit the earth. Only the meek shall inherit the earth. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. And so much Paka, when judging fruit, we must judge a person's obedience to Yah. We must judge their humility. We must judge the humility, the meekness. You can't obey Yah without being meek and humble. We must judge their obedience to Yah. Indeed, we must judge their humility. Yahusha said that we would know them by their fruits, not signs and wonders, and not their knowledge of Scripture, and not their deep revelation. Says that we would know them by their fruit. We would know them by their meekness and by their humility, by their love for one another, which is manifested in meekness and humility. Again, we cannot love without being meek and lowly and humble. Scripture indeed tells us that in the last days, many false Nabiyin would come demonstrating false signs and wonders. The magicians of Mashraim also performed signs and wonders when Masha and Aharun faced them. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. And so this is not an accurate gauge of fruit. Knowledge is not an accurate gauge of fruit. Revelation is not an accurate gauge of fruit. We must judge the fruit of humility, which is the fruit of the root. Barak Yahuwah. Even Shama'un, the sorcerer, commonly called Simon the magician, in the book of Acts, who wanted to buy the gift of the Ruach HaKadosh, was also said to have worked signs and wonders. And they thought that he was a great man. They thought that he worked in the power of Yahuwah Al-Yun. Oh yes, devils also work signs and wonders. And we must judge the fruit of humility and meekness. We must judge the fruit of obedience, which is grounded upon meekness and humility. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. Signs and wonders are indeed a byproduct of fruit. A byproduct of fruit, but they are not fruit. If a person is operating in signs and wonders, but has not fruit, but does not have fruit, then turn away from that person. If a person is operating in signs and wonders and does not have humility and does not have meekness, if a person has all of the knowledge, has acquired all of the knowledge of Shamayim and speaks prophecy and speaks as though, speaks as an oracle of Elohim, if he speaks all these things but has not love, which is grounded in meekness and humility, run from that person. Run from that person, because they are not of Yahuwah. They are not of Yahuwah. They are not of Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. They are not of Yahuwah. Neither should you believe in them. You should not believe in them. So do not, Abba does not want us to be deceived by the wicked one, because we have incorrectly judged fruit. Because we have incorrectly judged fruit. Nevertheless, we're still talking about fruit. We're still talking about fruit. Indeed, humility is the key to all things. Humility is the key to all things. Now let's take a look again at the fruit of the root. Let's take a look again at the fruit of the root. And it reads here: love, gentleness, shalom, patience, kindness, goodness, trustworthiness, gentleness, and self-control. This is the fruit of the root, and they are all interconnected. They are all synonymous with one another, and they are all based upon and laid upon the foundation of humility. Let's look again at gentle. Let's look again at the secular definition of gentle. Having or showing a mild, kind, or tender temperament or character. Kind, kindly, tender, benign, humane, lenient, merciful, forgiving, forbearing, and forbearing is patient, sympathetic, considerate, understanding, clement, compassionate, benevolent, kind-hearted, tender-hearted, good-natured, sweet-tempered, loving. This is all the fruit of the root, which is predicated and laid upon the foundation of humility. Indeed, humility is the fruit. This is the fruit. Meekness and humility is the fruit, and this is the way. This is the way to everlasting life. Meekness and humility is the way to everlasting life. Loving, mild, soft, quiet. We've talked about all of these words, how they tie back into meekness and humility. Quiet, shy, demure, modest, humble, retiring, unassuming, still, tranquil, peaceful, peaceable. All of this, if you don't know by now, points back to meekness and humility. Pacific, placid, serene, reposeful, reverent, meek, docile, listen, lamb-like, lamb-like. Lamb-like. A synonym for gentle is lamb-like. Lamb-like. And so now we talking about fruit. We identifying some fruit. And this is why Yahushua says his sheep know his voice and they follow him. Yes, a sheep is a very obedient animal. A sheep follows the voice of his master and it obeys the voice of his master. A sheep obeys Torah. A sheep is submissive. A sheep is gentle. A sheep is meek and docile and reverent. A sheep will follow the voice of the master wherever he goes. And a sheep is going to be given a song that no one else can sing in the number of 144,000. Yes, he is. Yes, he is. Oh, you will know them by their fruit. You will know them by their fruit. Indeed, either you are a sheep or you are a goat. Either you are a sheep or you are a goat. Either you are meek and gentle and humble and lamb-like and loving and kind and tender-hearted and reverent. Lamb-like, another word here is dove-like. Dove-like. Unless you are this, you're not entering. You're not going to enter into life. Indeed, the sheep are going to be separated from the goats. The sheep are going to be separated from the goats. The meek are going to be separated from the proud. The meek and humble are going to be separated from the proud. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. The meek are going to be separated from the proud. I'm going to read a couple more texts in the Baruch Kadashah, and then we're going to get to the meat of this. I'm going to read a couple more texts in the Baruch Kadashah, and then we're going to get to the meat of this message. Luke chapter 7. Turn to Luke chapter 7. Turn to Luke chapter 7. Turn to Luke chapter 7. Verse 1 through 10. Indeed, this is the fruit. Either you're a sheep or you're a goat. Period. And if you're not meek and humble, you're a goat. You are a prideful, stiff-necked goat who is very disobedient, who is hard to manage, who is very hard to manage. Anyone that knows anything about goats know that they are hard to manage. But a sheep is gentle, is meek, is docile, will follow his master, will reverence his master, will obey his master. Barak Yahuwah. Either you are a sheep or you a goat. Either you are a sheep or you a goat. Barak Yahuwah. There is no in between. There is no between. And if you are a sheep, then you're going to enter into life, because the meek shall inherit the earth. If you're a sheep, you're going to enter into life. Luke chapter 7, verse 1 through 10. And when he completed all his words in the hearing of the people, he went into Capharnaum, and a certain captain's servant who was valuable to him was sick and about to die. And hearing about Yahushua, he sent elders of the Yahudim to him, and asking him to come and heal his servant. And when they came to Yahushua, they begged him earnestly, saying, he is worthy for you to grant this to him, for he loves our nation and has built the congregation for us. So Yahushua went with them. However, he was not far from the house when the captain sent friends to him, saying to him, Master, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy that you should come under my roof. For this reason, I did not even think myself worthy to come to you. Are you hearing? For this reason, I did not even think myself worthy to come to you. But say a word, and my servant shall be healed. For I too am a man appointed under authority, having soldiers under me. And I say to one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes, and to my servant, do this, and he does it. And when Yahushua heard this, he marveled at him, and turned around and said to the crowd that followed him, I say to you, not even in Yasharal have I found such great belief. And those who were sent, returning to the house, found the servant who had been sick and good health. In good health. Indeed. Indeed. This man was a great man. He was a great man who had authority. But he humbled himself to this servant. Yahusha didn't look like much. We read this in Yeshayahu. He didn't look like much. He wasn't handsome. He wasn't well formed. He didn't have fancy clothing. He didn't look like much. But this very important man humbled himself and said, no, I'm not even worthy for you to come into my house. He humbled himself. He humbled himself, and his servant was healed. We find this also in Cornelius. Cornelius, the Roman centurion, who humbled himself. He bowed before the feet of Caiaphas. But Caiaphas told him not to bow before him. I'm just a man just like you are. But the point is, he was a humble man. Cornelius was a humble man. He was a meek and humble man. And thus the Ruach HaKodesh was sent to his house. The Ruach HaKodesh was sent to his house. He was a meek and humble man, and thus he submitted himself to the Torah of Yahuwah. You cannot submit yourself to the Torah of Yahuwah without being meek and humble. And unless you submit yourself to the Torah of Yahuwah, he will not send his Ruach HaKodesh. He won't. He won't. It's in the text. Acts chapter 5, verse 32. He won't. He won't. Indeed. Thus Yahusha says in Mataf Yahu, out of the 15th chapter, he says, I only come for the lost sheep of the house of Yahshua. He only came for his sheep. He only came for sheep. He's only coming back for sheep. The goats are going to be bound hand and foot. He's coming back for sheep. Indeed, either you are a sheep or you are a goat. And we understand that this term sheep extends far beyond the house of Yahshua, because there are others in his flock, Barak Yahuwah, in accordance with Yeshayahu 56, that he is going to gather. There is other amongst his flock that he is going to gather, because this is about the reconciliation of all mankind, of the remnant of mankind, of Adam, back to him. We are all his sheep. We're all his sheep if we obey him. We're all his sheep if we humble ourselves like a sheep, like a humble dove, like a dove, and become docile and meek and humble and obey his voice and follow his voice wherever he goes. We're all his sheep. We're all his sheep. Yahshua is not his only sheep. He has other sheep. But when he gathers them, guess what? They become a part of this flock. They become a part of this flock. Meaning they become assimilated into this flock. And they too become sheep amongst this flock of sheep. There's only one flock. There's only one flock. Indeed, either you're a sheep or a goat. I don't care what nation, tribe, or tongue you come from. Either you're a sheep or a goat. There is no in between. Either you're a sheep or you're a goat. And if you're a sheep, then by extension, you are his firstborn son. You are an adopted son. You become Yahshua. You become engrafted, and you become assimilated into his flock. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. So reading here in Matthew chapter 15, verse 22 through 28. And see, a woman of Canaan came from those borders and cried to him, saying, have compassion on me, O master, son of Dawood. My daughter is badly demon-possessed. But he did not answer her word. And his taught ones came and asked them, saying, send her away, because she cries after us. And he answered and said, I was not sent, listen family, I was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Yahshua. But she came and was bowing to him, saying, Master, help me, help me. And he answering said, it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. But she said, yes, master, for even the little dogs eat the crumbs which fall from their master's table. And Yahusha answering said to her, O woman, your belief is great. Let it be to you as you desire. And her daughter was healed from that hour. Did he go back on his word? No, he didn't. He said he came for the lost sheep of the house of Yahshua. When this woman humbled herself, when she became meek and humble like a sheep, she became a sheep. She became a sheep. And thus he healed her daughter. Does it not say in Matthew chapter 1, towards the bottom, that you shall call his name Yahusha, for he shall do what? Deliver his people from their crimes. Do you not understand when a person who is demon possessed is delivered from demon possession, is being delivered from crime? He said he came to deliver his people from their crimes. So when she acted like a sheep, like a meek and lowly and humble sheep, she indeed was his people. She was a sheep. She acted like a sheep, and she received Yahshua in her house. And unless we act like sheep, we're not going to receive Yahshua in our houses. We are not going to inherit life unless we act like sheep. Barak Yahuwah. And humble ourselves. And humble ourselves. Indeed, let's talk about fruit. Let's talk about fruit. Let's talk about fruit. Humility is the key to all things. Humility is the key to all things. Humility is the key to all things. Let's look at 1 Peter. 1 Peter chapter 5, and then we're going to move on to the meat of this. 1 Peter chapter 5. 1 Peter chapter 5. Verse 5 through 7. In the same way that Yahusha left an example for us, in the same way that he left an example, he showed us the way to salvation is through humility. In the same way, he has given an awesome responsibility to wives. He has given an awesome example, a responsibility to wives. Because when wives submit to their husbands, she is, by example, showing her husband how he is to be meek and mild and humble and submissive to our husband Yahusha, whereby both now, Aish and Aisha, are entering into life. The Aisha showing by example, showing her Aish, this is how, by not even speaking words, showing him, this is how you are to be submissive and meek and humble and mild. And he paying attention to her chaste behavior. Then he too begins to operate in a meek and mild and humble behavior. And thus both of them, her by submitting to her husband, thus submitting to the judgment in Genesis 3:16. And him observing her chaste example. And then humbling himself, thus submitting to the judgment in Genesis 3:17 through 19. Submitting to the judgment, both becoming servants. We becoming servants, submitting, being meek and humble, so that we will enter into life. So the Aisha, you have an awesome responsibility. You have an awesome responsibility to not, without speaking a word, showing your Aish how he too is to operate in meekness and humility. Reading now in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 5 through 7. In the same way, you younger ones, be subject to elders. Actually, no, let me go up. That's the wrong one. It's 1 Peter chapter 3. 1 Peter chapter 3. Tell you what, someone here turn to 1 Peter chapter 3 and read down to verse 7. Someone turn to 1 Peter chapter 3 and read down to verse 7.
1 Peter chapter 3. In the same way, wives, be subject to your own husbands, so that if any are disobedient to the word, they without word might be won by the behavior of their wives, having seen your blameless behavior in fear. Your adornment should not be outward, arranging the hair, wearing gold, or putting on dresses, but the hidden man of the heart, with the incorruptible ornament of a meek and peaceable ruach, which is of great value before Elohim. For in this way, in former times, the Kadesh women who trusted in Elohim also adorned themselves, being subject to their own husbands. As Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him master, of whom you became children, doing good and not frightened by any fear. In the same way, husbands live understandingly together, giving respect to the Asha as the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the favor of life, so that your prayers are not hindered.
Barak Yahuwah, Barak Yahuwah. So joint heirs to the favor of life, joint heirs. And so when the Aisha humbles herself and submits herself to her husband, becoming obedient to him, becoming meek and humble, submitting to him, by her behavior, she is teaching her husband how he too is to become meek and humble. By her example, she is showing him how to be meek and humble. And so when she is meek and humble, she now is in obedience to the judgment that was pronounced in Genesis 3:16. And by doing so, she will enter into life by humbling herself. And by her example, when the husband sees her example on how to be meek and humble, because men are a little bit more hardened than women. And so we need a little bit more guidance than women on how to be meek and humble. And so, but when we see the example of our Aishas on how to be meek and humble, now we too are in compliance with the judgment to become servants in accordance with Genesis 3:17 through 19. And thus we too will enter into life, and we now will be joint heirs together, entering into life, where the meek will inherit the earth. Where the meek will inherit the earth. Barak Yahuwah. Turn to 1 Peter chapter 5. 1 Peter chapter 5. 1 Peter chapter 5. Verse 5 through 7. And the same way, you younger ones, be subject to elders. Here we are again. Subject. Subjectivity is humility. Being subject to one is to humble yourself to them. To humble yourself. To humble yourself. This is the same theme all throughout Scripture. This is the judgment. If we want to enter into life, we must humble ourselves. We must become servants, as Yahusha showed us the way. And the same way, you younger ones, be subject to elders, and gird yourselves with humility towards one another. For Elohim resists the proud, but gives favor to the humble. Humble yourself then under the mighty hand of Elohim, so that he exalts you in due time, casting all your worries upon him, for he is concerned about you. For he is concerned about you. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. I'm going to read a couple of apocryphal scriptures, and then we're going to get into the meat. We're almost done. I'm going to read a couple of apocryphal scriptures just to give us an understanding that our righteous fathers, they understood this. Our righteous fathers understood that meekness and humility is the way, and they walked in it. You see, this too is the ancient path. This is the ancient path. All of our righteous fathers walked in this very same way, walked in meekness and humility. All of our righteous fathers did, beginning with Adam. All of them walked in meekness and humility, even going down to Yahushua HaMashiach himself. They all walked in meekness and humility, and they're all entering into life. Let's look at Jasher, the 22nd chapter. If you don't have it, just write it down. I'll just go quickly through these so I can get into the main text. Jasher, the 22nd chapter, verse 11 through 13. Jasher, the 22nd chapter, verse 11 through 13. Verse 11 through 13. Yashar, the 22nd chapter, verse 11 through 13. Listen. And Abraham planted a large grove in Baal Shabat, and he made to it 4 gates facing the 4 sides of the earth. And he planted a vineyard in it, so that if a traveler came to Abraham, he entered any gate which was in his road, and remained there, and ate and drank and satisfied himself, and then departed. For the house of Abraham was always open to the sons of men that passed and repassed. He was a very humble man. Abraham was a very, 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 very humble man. This is why he was called a friend of Yahuwah, because he was a very, very humble man. Remember, Abraham was in Babel. He was in the land of Ur, Chaldea. He was in the land of Namrud. He was in Babylon. And remember, the eyes of Yahuwah does what? Goes to and fro, looking for a heart that's perfect towards him, looking for a meek and humble heart. And so his eyes went to and fro across the whole earth, and they fixed upon this meek and humble man right here, Abraham, our righteous father, and said, Abram, I am calling you out of this land, out of your father's house, into a land in which I will show you. Because Abram was a meek and humble man. Yes, he was. Yes, he was. Yes, he was. Listen, for the house of Abraham was always open to the sons of men that passed and repassed, who came daily to eat and drink in the house of Abraham. And any man who had hunger and come to Abraham's house, Abraham would give him bread that he might eat and drink and be satisfied. You see, this right here is true Ahabah. This is true Ahabah. You see, this is a noun. This is love personified. This is love in action. This is something that you can feel and touch and taste. See, Abraham didn't give them lip service. He gave them something. He gave them something. And the point has been made that in order to do this, you must operate in meekness and humility. You cannot operate in love unless you're meek and humble. Barak Yahuwah. Indeed, Abraham was a very meek and humble man. And anyone that came naked to his house, he would clothe with garments as he might choose, and give him silver and gold, and make him known to Yahuwah, and make known to him Yahuwah, who had created him and the earth. This did Abraham all his life. Turn to Jasher chapter 26. Yashar chapter 26. Yashar chapter 26. Jasher chapter 26. And we're going to read verse 29 through 38. Yashar chapter 26. I'm going to read chapter 29 through 38. And it was at that time that Abraham died, in the 15th year of the life of Yaqub and Esau. Yaqub was another gentleman. Yaqub was another gentleman of the flocks. He was a man of the tent. He is described in the book of Jubilees as being a quiet man of the tent. We just read up above what is a synonym of quiet. It means to be humble. He was a humble man. Yaqub was another humble man. Indeed, I just told you, all of our righteous fathers operated in this fruit, operated in meekness and humility. They were sheep, and they are going to enter into life. Barak Yahuwah. They are going to enter into life. And it was at that time Abraham died in the 15th year of the life of Yaqub and Esau. And if you can receive it, if you understand, the sheep are Yasharal, the sheep are Yaqub. And because when you read the book of Canute, it doesn't begin to talk about sheep until Yaqub, until we reach Yaqub. Everything prior to Yaqub, the righteous fathers before Yaqub were considered white bulls. But they were still considered righteous. And at the end of Canute, the white bulls are what? They are placed in the midst of the flock, in the midst of the sheep, which began with Yaqub. But if you can understand it, there are our hateful brothers who are operating in that fruit. We see their fruit. We see their fruit, talking about that all white people are Esau, all white people are Edomites, showing their fruit, showing their ignorance, not understanding that in the end, it's going to come down between sheep and goats. It's going to come down between who? Jacob and Esau. Jacob and Esau. Jacob represents the sheep. Esau represents the goats. Esau represents the goats. There is no in between. Either you are a sheep or you are a goat. There is no in between. Irrespective of your melanated color, irrespective of your hair texture, irrespective of your nation, tribe, or tongue. Either you are a sheep or you are a goat. You will know them by their fruit. We will know them by their fruit, not their genealogy. And it was at that time that Abraham died in the 15th year of the life of Yaqub and Esau, the sons of Ishkar, and all the days of Abraham were 175 years. And he died and was gathered to his people in good old age, old and satisfied with days. And Ishkar and Ishmael his sons buried him. And when the inhabitants of Canaan heard that Abraham was dead, they all came with their Malachim, with their sovereigns and princes, and all their men to bury Abraham. And all the inhabitants of the land of Haran, and all the families of the house of Abraham, and all the princes and grandees and the sons of Abraham by the concubines, all came when they heard of Abraham's death. And they requited, listen, and they requited Abraham's kindness. This is the fruit of the root. And they requited Abraham's kindness, which means gentleness and meekness. So they requited his gentleness and his meekness. Indeed, I just told you, all of our righteous father bore this fruit. And all his people, all of his sheep, his true sheep, still bear this fruit. And comforted Ishkak his son. And they buried Abraham in the cave which he bought from Ephron and Kittim and his children for the possession of a burial place. And all the inhabitants of Canaan, and all those who had known Abraham wept for Abraham a whole year. And men and women returned over him. And all the little children and all the inhabitants of the land wept on account of Abraham. For Abraham had been good to them all. He had showed them love. He was gentle. He was meek to them all. And because he had been upright with Elohim and men. And there arose not a man who feared Elohim, who revered Elohim. Indeed, one of the words for gentle that describes gentle is reverent. 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 This is another word synonymous with meekness. This is another word that is synonymous with meekness. You can't say that you revere Yahuwah if you don't have meekness and humility in you. You're a liar. You're a liar. If we revere Yahuwah, then we will submit and obey him. Listen what it says. Listen what it says. And there arose not a man who revered Elohim like unto Abraham. For he had revered his Elohim from his youth, and had served Yahuwah, and had gone in all his ways during his life, from his childhood to the day of his death. And so this is, reading on, I'm sorry, I still got more to read. And Yahuwah was with him, and delivered him from the counsel of Namrud and his people. And when he made war with the four kings of Elam, he conquered them. And he brought all the children of the earth, to the service of Elohim. And he taught them the ways of Yahuwah, and caused them to know Yahuwah. And he formed a grove, and he planted a vineyard therein. This is love in action. This is ahabah. This is when love becomes a noun. This is when love becomes something that you can see and taste and touch. And he formed a cave. And indeed, we can't love without meekness and humility. We cannot love without being meek and humble. And he formed the grove, and he planted a vineyard therein. And he had always prepared his tent, meat and drink to those that passed through the land, that they might satisfy themselves in his house. And Yahuwah Elohim delivered the whole earth on account of Abraham. On account of Abraham. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. Turn now, Mashpaka, to Genesis 23. We're almost done now. Genesis 23. Abba wants to show you another example here. He showed us the example in the Barit Kadashah. He showed us the example in the Barit Kadashah of Yahusha. Yahusha showed us the way. Yahusha showed us that the way to everlasting life is through meekness and humility and through becoming a servant. He showed us the way. And as he told his taught ones, that we are to imitate his example and do as he did. And do as he did. And if we do as he did, we will enter into life, because the meek shall inherit the earth. So he showed us in the Barit Kadashah by his example. He is the main example to what we should be looking towards in the Barit Kadashah. Indeed, however, even his taught ones operated in this self-same way. We can also We can also look to their example. We can also look to the example of Ambassador Shaul, who says these words, "Follow me as I follow the Hamashiach." He too, if you follow the words of Shaul, you will see that he operated in this self-same spirit of meekness and humility. Sometimes when you read the words of Shaul, you can often say within yourself, "Wow, he is operating just like Yahusha. He is just like Yahusha. He loves just like him." Thus he was able to say, "Follow me as I follow the Hamashiach," because he too operated in that same root of meekness and humility. Barak Yahuwah. Genesis 23. Now we're going to look to the example in the Torah. We're going to look to the example in the Torah of everlasting life and being exalted back to our throne, and being exalted back to our natural state, which were we created for. When Adam was created, he was created as a ruler, and he ruled the Arats until Hashatan usurped that authority from him. And so now the only way back to that place is through submission, is through servitude, is through obedience to the judgment that was pronounced over us in Barashif 3, verses 16 through 19. It's through submission, meekness, and humility as a humble servant. Let's read now in Barashif chapter 23, verse 1 through 18, beginning at verse 1. And Sharai lived 127 years. The years of the life of Sharai. Hold on. I'm sorry. Strike that, Mashpaka. Strike that. Strike that. Strike that. Let's go. Let's go. We are in Barashif. We are in Barashif. By the way, Malak Dawood was the same way. He had the same meek and humble heart as our righteous fathers. If you familiar with Malak Dawood and you read about him, you'll understand this, that he was meek and humble just like our righteous fathers. Just like our righteous father. And what does it say about him? That he had a heart after Yah. He had a heart called after Yah, because he had a meek and humble heart, just like his father, just like Yahuwah. Indeed, he was a meek and humble servant, a meek and humble servant king, a meek and humble servant Malak, just like our righteous fathers, just like our righteous fathers. But before he was exalted to the throne, what was he? He was a shepherd boy. He was a servant. He even served Shaul. He even served the Malak Shaul. He was a servant. Before he was exalted, he too was a servant. In fact, he was a servant Malak. He was a servant sovereign, a very humble Malak, a very humble servant Malak. Indeed, this is the example. This is the example. The example didn't just begin in the Barich Kadashah. The example began with Adam. Indeed, if you read the forgotten books of Adam and Kua, you can read how childlike and lamb-like and sheep-like Adam was. He was childlike. He was like a humble sheep. He was a sheep. He was a sheep. And he too is going to enter into life. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. So the example began with him. It actually began with him. But now let's take a look now at Genesis chapter 39. Genesis chapter 39. Barashif, Genesis chapter 39, verse 1 through 23. Barashif, Genesis 39, verse 1 through 23, beginning at verse 1. And Yahusuf had been taken down to Mashraim and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh. Before we go on, I need you to understand that Yahusuf is the firstborn. He is the firstborn. Yahusuf is Yasha'al. He carries the name of his father. Yahusuf is the firstborn, and by extension, his youngest son, Ephraim, who also carries the name of his grandfather, Yasha'al. So we're talking here about the firstborn. We're talking about the firstborn. The firstborn. The first resurrection. The first fruit. The sheep. We're talking about the firstborn. Here in the example of Yahushua. He is the firstborn. He carries the firstborn barakah, which was passed down from him to his son Ephraim. And Yahushua had been taken down to Mashraim. And Potiphar, an officer of Par'ah, captain of the guard, a Mashra'i, brought him from the Ishmaeli, who had taken him down there. And it came to be that Yahuwah was with Yahushua. And he became a prosperous man, and was in the house of his master, the Mashra'i, and was in the house of his master, the Mashra'i. And his master saw that Yahuwah was with him, and that Yahuwah made all he did to prosper in his hand. So Yahushua found favor in the eyes, and did what? And served him. And served him. And he appointed him over his house, and gave into his hand all that he had. And it came to be, from the time that he appointed him over his house, and all that he had, that Yahuwah baruch the Mashra'i's house for Yahushua's sake. And the barakah of Yahuwah, was on all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left in Yahushua's hand all that he had. And he did not know what he had except for the bread which he ate. And Yahushua was handsome in form, and handsome in appearance. And after these events, it came to be that his master's wife lifted up her eyes to Yahushua and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Look, my master does not know what is with me in the house, and he has given into my hand all that he has. No one is greater in his house than I, and he has not withheld whatever from me but you, because you are his wife. And how shall I do this great evil and commit crime against Elohim?" And it came to be, as she spoke to Yahushua day by day, that he did not listen to her, to lie with her, to be with her. And it came to be on a certain day, when Yahushua went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was inside, that she called him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left this garment in her hand, and fled and ran outside. And it came to be, when she saw that he had left her garment in her hand and fled outside, that she called to the men of her house and spoke to them, saying, "See, he has brought into us a Hebrew, an Abari, to mock us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And it came to be, when he heard that I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled and went outside. And she kept this garment with her until his master came home. And she spoke to him these same words, saying, the Abari, the Hebrew servant, whom you brought to us, came into me to mock me. So it came to be, as I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left this garment with me and fled outside. And it came to be, when his master heard the words which his wife spoke to him, saying, your servant did to me according to these words, that his displeasure burned. Then Yahushua's master took him and put him into prison, a place where the sovereign's prisoners were confined. And he was there in the prison. But Yahuwah was with Yahushua and extended loving commitment to him, extended compassion to him. And he gave him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. And the prison warden gave into the hand of Yahushua all the prisoners who were in the prison. And whatever was done there was his doing. The prison warden did not look into any point that was under Yahushua's hand, because Yahuwah was with him. And whatever he did, Yahuwah made it prosper. Turn to chapter 40. Turn to chapter 40. Turn to chapter 40. We're going to read down through verse 23, verse 1 through 23. beginning at verse 1. And after these events, it came to be that the cupbearer and the baker of the sovereign of Mizraim committed crime against their master, the sovereign of Mizraim. And Paro was wroth with his two officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. So he put them in confinement in the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison, the place where Yahusuf was a prisoner. And the captain of the guard put Yahusuf in charge of them. And he served them, and he served them, and he served them. So they were in confinement for some time. Then the cupbearer and the baker of the sovereign of Mizraim, who were confined in the prison, dreamed a dream, both of them, each man's dream in one night, and each man's dream with its own interpretation. And Yahusuf came in to them in the morning and looked at them and saw that they were sad. And he asked Paro's officers who were with him in the confinement of his master's house, saying, why do you look so sad today? And they said to him, we each have dreamed a dream, and there is no one to interpret it. And Yahusuf said to them, do not interpretations belong to Elohim? Relate them to me, please. So the chief cupbearer related his dream to Yahusuf and said to them, see, in my dream, a vine was before me, and in the vine were 3 branches, and it was as though it budded. Its blossoms shot forth, and its clusters brought forth ripe grapes. And Paro's cup was in my hand. So I took the grapes and pressed them into Paro's cup, and placed the cup in Paro's hand. And Yahusuf said to him, this is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Yet within 3 days, Paro is going to lift up your head and restore you to your place. And you shall put Paro's cup in his hand according to the former ruling, when you were his cupbearer. But remember me when it is well with you, and please show loving commitment to me, and maintain and mention me to Paro, and get me out of this house. For truly I was stolen away from the land of the Hebrews, of the Abraim. And also I have done naught that should put me into the dungeon. And the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good. And he said to Yahusuf, I also was in my dream. And saw 3 white baskets were on my head, and the uppermost basket, all kinds, and in the uppermost basket, all kinds of baked goods of Paro, and the birds ate them out of the basket on my head. And Yahusuf answered and said, this is the interpretation of it. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Yet within 3 days, Paro is going to lift off your head from you, and bring and hang you on a tree. And the birds shall eat your flesh from you. And on the 3rd day, Paro's birthday, it came to be that he made a feast for all his servants. And he lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and of the chief baker among his servants. And he restored the chief cupbearer to his post of cupbearer again. And he placed the cup in Pharaoh's and Paro's hand, but he hanged the chief baker, as Yahusuf had interpreted to them. And the chief cupbearer did not remember Yahusuf, but forgot him. Turn to Genesis chapter 41. Genesis chapter 41. All this time, Yahusuf is a servant. All this time, he is a servant. Indeed, he was a servant for 13 years. He was a servant for 13 years. 13 years. He was in prison for 12 years, and he was a servant to Potiphar for 1 year. So he was a servant for a total of 13 years. A total of 13 years. Genesis 41, verse 1 through 46. And it came to be at the end of 2 years' time that Paro had a dream, and saw him standing by the river, and saw 7 cows coming up out of the river, beautiful looking and fat. And they fed amongst the reeds. And they fed amongst the reeds. We understand that the number 13 is representative of rebellion. It is a representation of rebellion. Rebellion is a representation of crime. Rebellion is a representation of crime. And so Yahushua, who carries the name of Yashar'al, and by extension his son Ephraim, who also carries the name of Yashar'al, his firstborn. Yashar'al being a representation of the remnant of mankind. Being a representation of the remnant of mankind, we have to do what? We have to play out and serve out our period of rebellion. What rebellion? Our father Adam. We have to serve our period of rebellion as servants. As servants. We have to serve out our time of rebellion as servants. As servants. And this is the only way that we are going to be exalted. This is the only way that we are going to inherit the earth. That we serve out the judgment. That we serve out the judgment. That we serve out our period of rebellion as servants. As servants. As Yahushua served 13 years, which is symbolic of rebellion. And it came to be at the end of 2 years. Where was I at? That Pharaoh had a dream. Okay. The Pharaoh had a dream and saw him standing by the river and saw 7 cows coming up out of the river, beautiful looking and fat. And they fed amongst the reeds. Then saw 7 other cows coming up after them out of the river, ugly, lean of flesh, and stood by the other cows on the bank of the river. And the ugly and lean of the flesh cows ate up the 7 beautiful looking and fat cows. Then Pa'ah awoke, and he slept and dreamed a second time, and saw 7 heads of grain coming up on one stalk, plump and good, and saw 7 lean heads scorched by the east wind coming up after them. And the 7 lean heads swallowed the 7 plump and complete heads. Then Pa'ah awoke and saw it was a dream. And it came to be in the morning that his root was moved. And he sent and called for all the magicians of Mashraim and all its prudent men. And Pa'ah related to them his dreams. But there was no one who could interpret them for Pa'ah. Then the chief cupbearer spoke to Pa'ah, saying, I remember my crimes this day. When Pa'ah was wroth with his servant and put me in confinement in the house of the captain of the guard, both me and the chief baker, each one of us dreamed a dream in one night, he and I. Each of us dreamed according to the interpretation of his own dream. And there was with us an Abari youth, a Hebrew youth, a servant of the captain of the guard, and we related to him, and he interpreted our dream for us. To each man he interpreted according to his own dream. And it came to be as he interpreted for us. So it came to be. He restored me to my office, and he hanged him. Then Pa'ah sent and called Yahushua, and they hurriedly brought him out of the dungeon. And he shaved and changed his garments, and came to Pa'ah. And Pa'ah said to Yahushua, I have dreamed a dream, and there is no one to interpret it. Now I myself have heard it said of you that you understand a dream to interpret it. And Yahushua answered Pa'ah, saying, It is not in me. Let Elohim answer Pa'ah with shalom. And Pa'ah said to Yahushua, See, in my dream I stood on the bank of the river and saw 7 cows coming up out of the river, beautiful looking and fat. And they fed amongst the reeds. Then saw 7 other cows coming up after them, poor and very ugly, lean of flesh, such ugliness as I have never seen in all the land of Mashraim. And the lean of flesh and ugly cows ate up the first 7, the fat cows. Yet when they had eaten them up, no one would have known that they had eaten them, for they were as ugly as at the beginning. Then I awoke. Also I looked in my dream and saw 7 heads coming up on one stalk, complete and good. Then saw 7 heads, withered, lean, scorched by the east wind, coming up after them. And the lean heads swallowed the 7 good heads. And I spoke to the magicians, but there was no one who could explain it to me. And Yahushua said to Pa'ah, The dream of Pa'ah is one. Elohim has shown Pa'ah what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads are 7 years. It is one dream. And the 7 lean and ugly cows which came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty heads scorched by the east wind are 7 years of scarcity of food. This is the word which I spoke to Par-ah. Elohim has shown Par-ah what he is about to do. See, 7 years of great plenty are coming in the land of Mashraim. But after them 7 years of scarcity of food shall arise, and all the plenty be forgotten in the lands of Mashraim. And the scarcity of food shall destroy the land, and the plenty shall not be remembered in the land, because of the scarcity of food following, for it is very severe. And the dream was repeated to Par-ah twice, because the word is established by Elohim. Indeed, by the mouth of 2 or more witnesses, let every matter be established. And Elohim is hastening to do it. And now let Par-ah look for a discerning and cocker man, a prudent man, and set him over the land of Mashraim. Let Par-ah do this, and let him appoint overseers over the land, to take up 1/5 of the land of Mashraim in the 7 years of plenty. And let them gather all the food of those good years that are coming, and store up grain under the hand of Par-ah, and let them keep food in the cities. And the food shall be for a store for the land, for the 7 years of scarcity of food, which shall be in the land of Mashraim, and do not let the land be cut off by the scarcity of food. And the word was good, and the word was good in the eyes of Par-ah, and in the eyes of all his servants. And Par-ah said to his servants, could we find another like him, a man in whom is the Ruach of Elohim? And whom is the Ruach of Elohim? Now Abba has already told us that his Ruach is meek, that the fruit of the Ruach is humility. It's the fruit of the Ruach is humility. And so if we have the fruit of the Ruach, if we have the spirit of Elohim in us, then we too are operating in meekness and humility. We too are operating as servants. Oh, we're going to talk just a little bit about this more, but we're almost done. We're almost done. So it says here, could we find another like him, a man in whom is the spirit, the Ruach of Elohim? So indeed, he was a meek and humble man, a servant, a servant. Then Par-ah said to Yahusha, since Elohim has shown you all this, there is no one as discerning and cockam as you. Be over my house. Be over my house. Indeed, the words of the HaMashiach, you have shown yourself worthy over. You've shown yourself worthy over a few things. I'm going to make you a ruler over many. Indeed, be over my house. Be over my house. You've shown yourself a trustworthy servant, and shown yourself to be trustworthy over a few things. Now, I'm going to make you ruler over much. Barak Yahuwah. Be over my house. You yourself, and at your mouth all my people shall kiss. Only in the throne I am greater than you. And Par-ah said to Yahusha, see, I have set you over all the land of Mashraim. I have set you over all the land of Mashraim. And Par-ah took his seal ring off his hand and put it on Yahusha's hand. And he dressed them in garments of fine linen. Indeed, we're not going to get those garments of fine linen unless we are operating as Yahusha, as meek and humble servants, as lambs, as servants. We're not going to be exalted and get these fine linen garments unless we are operating as him, as servants, and in doing so, being in compliance with the judgment that was pronounced over us in Genesis 3, chapter 16 through verse 19. And put a gold chain around his neck. And put a gold chain around his neck. Indeed, this sounds a whole lot like the prodigal son. A whole lot like the prodigal son. And he had him ride in the second chariot which he had. And they cried out before him, bowed the knee, and he set him over all the land of Mashraim. And Par-ah said to Yahusha, I am Par-ah, and without a word from you, let no man lift his hand or foot in all the land of Mashraim. And Par-ah called Yahusha's name, Zaphnath Pa-Na'ah, Zaphnath Pa-Na'ah. Zaf Naf Pa Naak. Zaf Naf Pa Naak. And he gave him a wife, Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, priest of On. And Yahusuf went out over all the land of Mashraim. Now Yahusuf was 30 years old when he stood before Par'ah and sovereign of Mashraim. And Yahusuf went out from the presence of Par'ah and went throughout all the land of Mashraim. What Abba wants us to understand, indeed, he has told us that Joseph was the firstborn. Yahusuf was the firstborn. He carried the firstborn Barakah. He carried the name of his father, Yasha'al. And by extension, Ephraim carried the firstborn Barakah and carried the name of his grandfather, Yasha'al. What does the name Yasha'al mean? It means to rule with Elohim. It means prince of Elohim. And so what Abba is trying to show you, to show us that the way back to the throne to rule with him, Yasha'al, prince of Elohim, is through servitude. The same servitude that is shown in the example of Yahusha, and the same servitude that is shown in the example of Yahusha. We must become low. We must become meek and humble servants in order to be exalted back to our throne in the same manner in which Yahusha was exalted, and in the same manner in which Yahusha was exalted, in accordance with Philippians, the 2nd chapter. I'm going to read one more verse, one more text, and we're going to shut this down, just to add further credence to the humility of Yahusha, to the humility of Yahusha. And only through his humility was he exalted. And only through our humility are we going to be exalted back to the throne as rulers. And only through our humility are we going to be identified as sheep, and are we going to inherit the earth, because only the meek shall inherit the earth. I'm going to read to you. You can just write this down. I'm going to read to you from the Testament of Joseph. The Testament of Joseph. This can be found in the forgotten books of Adam and or Adam and Eve. This is the Testament of the 12 patriarchs. The Testament of the 12 patriarchs. I'm going to read here the Testament of Joseph, the Testament of Yahusha, just to bear witness of his humility, Beginning at verse 1, I'm going to read the chapter in its entirety, and then we're going to shut this down. Yea, see, therefore, my children, how great things patience worketh. Patience is fruit. Patience is the fruit of the root. This is the fruit of the root. How great things patience worketh, and prayer with fasting. So ye too, if you follow after humility and purity and patience and prayer with fasting, in humility of heart, Yahuwah will dwell among you. Yahuwah will dwell among you. Indeed, his eyes go to and fro, looking for a heart that's perfect, that's perfect towards him. He looks for a humble heart. He looks for a humble heart. With fasting and humility of heart, Yahuwah will dwell among you, because he loveth humility. He loveth humility. And wheresoever all our yum dwelleth, even though envy, or slavery, or slander befalleth a man. And so he's saying here, if humility dwells in your heart, it says here in verse 3, and wheresoever all yum dwelleth, even though they envy. Why? Because humility dwells in that person's heart. Even though they envy, he still dwells in that person's heart, because they have a heart of humility. Or slavery, or slander befalleth a man. Yahuwah, who dwelleth in him, for the sake of his humility, not only delivereth him from evil, but also exalted him, even as me. Indeed, If you don't humble yourselves, Mashpaka, if we don't humble ourselves, we're not going to be exalted. And here he says, even if a man struggles with envy and slavery or slander, if he has humility in his heart, Yahuwah will deliver him. Yahuwah will deliver him for the sake of his humility. For the sake of his humility, he will deliver him as he had delivered him, as he delivered Yahushua because of the sake of his humility. He had exalted him because of the sake of his humility. Verse 4, for in every way the man is lifted up, whether in deed or in word or in thought. My brethren knew how my father loved me, and yet I did not exalt myself in my mind. Although I was a child, I had the reverence of Elohim in my heart. I had the reverence of Elohim in my heart. You can't reverence him if you're not meek and humble. For I knew that all things would pass away. And I did not raise myself against them with evil intent, but I honored my brethren, and out of respect for them, even when I was being said, I refrained from telling the Ishmaeli that I was a son of Yaqub, a great man and a mighty. Do ye also, my children, have the reverence of Elohim in your works. Indeed, reverence is fruit. Reverence is fruit. And you can't have reverence without being meek and humble. Do ye also, my children, have the reverence of Elohim in your works before your eyes, and honor your brethren. For everyone who doeth the law of Yahuwah shall be loved by him. And when I came to the Indocopite with the Ishmaeli, they asked me, saying, art thou a slave? And I said that I was a homeborn slave. Actually, let me start over, verse 9. And when I came to the Indocopite with the Ishmaeli, they asked me, saying, art thou a slave? And I said that I was a homeborn slave, that I might not put my brethren to shame. Listen to his humility. Listen to his meekness. This is why he was exalted, second in charge. This is why he was exalted, and he was ruler over the whole land of Yasha'al. This is why he was exalted. And this is how we too are going to be exalted back to our thrones. We were created to rule. We were created to rule. And that promise to restore that reign of rule back to Adam was passed down through Jacob. Don't think it's coincidence that his name was changed to Yasha'al, which means rule with Elohim, which means prince to Elohim. We're being restored back to our reign, back to being rulers. But the only way to be restored is to humble ourselves. In the same way that Yahushua humbled himself, and in the same way that Yahushua humbled himself. And the elders of them said unto me, thou art not a slave, for even thy appearance doth make it manifest. But I said that I was their slave. Now when we came into Egypt, Mashraim, they strove concerning me, which of them should buy me and take me. Therefore it seemed good to all that I should remain in Egypt with the merchant of their trade, until they should return bringing merchandise. And Yahuwah gave me favor in the eyes of the merchant, and he entrusted unto me his house. And Elohim Baruch him by my means, and increased him in gold and silver and in household servants. And I was with him 3 months and 5 days. And about that time, the Memphaim woman, the wife of Pontifris, this is Pentifris, it says Pentifris here, came down in a chariot with great pomp, because she had heard from her eunuchs concerning me. And she told her husband that the merchant had become rich by means of a young Abari, a young Hebrew, and they say that he had assuredly been stolen out of the land of Canaan. Now, therefore, render right ruling unto him, and take away the youth to thy house. So shall the Elohim of the Abarim Barak thee, for favor from Shamayim is upon him. And Pt2 was persuaded by her words, and commanded the merchant to be brought, and said unto him, What is this that I hear concerning thee, that thou stealest persons out of the land of Canaan, and sellest them for slaves? But the merchant fell at his feet, and besought him, saying, I beseech thee, my master, I know not what you say. And Pt2 said unto him, Whence then is the ivory slave? And he said, The Ishmael Ali entrusted him unto me until they should return. But he believed them not, but commanded him to be stripped and beaten. And when he persisted in his statement, Pt2 said, Let the youth be brought. And when I was brought in, I did obeisance. He humbled himself. He bowed before him. He laid prostrate. He was a meek and humble man. And when I was brought in, the same as his father Jacob, when he came in the courts of Parah, he bowed before him. He did obeisance. He also was a meek and humble man. He bowed before him. And when I was brought in, I did obeisance to Pt2, for he was third in rank of the officers of Parah. And he took me apart from him and said unto me, Art thou a slave or free? And I said, A slave. And he said, Whose? And I said, The Ishmael Ali. And he said, How didst thou become their slave? Now he said all these things in order not to bring shame on his brothers. He said all these things in order not to bring shame on his brothers. He humbled himself in order not to bring shame on his brothers, and became a slave, a meek and humble servant. And he said, How didst thou become their slave? And I said, They bought me out of the hand of the Canaan. And he said unto me, Truly thou liest. And straightway he commanded me to be stripped and beaten. Now the Mizraim woman, who was looking through a window at me while I was being beaten, for her house was near, and she said unto him, saying, Thy judgment is unrighteous, is unrighteous. For thou doest punish a free man who hath been stolen, as though he were a transgressor. And when I made no charge in my statement, though I was beaten, he ordered me to be in prison until he said the owners of the boy should come. And the woman said unto her husband, Wherefore doest thou detain the captive and well-born lad in bonds, and art rather to be set at freedom and be waited upon? For she wished to see me out of a desire of crime, but I was ignorant concerning all these things. Verse 41. And he said to her, It is not the custom of the Mashra'i, the Egyptians, to take that which belongeth to others before proof is given. This, therefore, he said concerning the merchant. But as for the lad, he must be in prison. Now after 24 days came the Ishmael Ali, for they had heard that Yaqub my father was mourning much concerning me. And they came and said unto me, How is it that thou saidest that thou was a slave? And lo, we have learnt that thou art the son of a mighty man in the land of Canaan, and thy father still mourneth for thee in sackcloth and ashes. When I heard this, my bowels were dissolved, and my heart melted. And I desired greatly to weep, but I restrained myself that I should not put my brethren to shame. But I restrained myself that I should not put my brethren to shame. This is meekness. This is humility. And I said unto them, I know not, I am a slave. Then therefore they took counsel to sell me, that I should not be found in their hands. For they feared my father, lest he should come and execute upon them a grievous vengeance. For they had heard that he was mighty with Elohim and with men. Then said the merchant unto them, Release me from the judgment of Pt2. And they came and requested me, saying, Say that thou wast brought by us with money, and he will set us free. Now the Mizraim woman said to her husband, Buy the youth, for I hear, said she, that they are selling him. And straightway she sent a eunuch to the Ishmael Ali, and asked them to sell me. But since the eunuchs would not agree to buy me at their price, he returned, having made trial of them, and he made known to his mistress that they asked a large price for their slave. And she sent another eunuch, saying, even though they demand 2 minas, give them, do not spare the gold, only buy the boy and bring him to me. The eunuch therefore went and gave him 80 pieces of gold, and he received me. But to the Mashrai woman, he said, I have given 100, and though I knew this, I held my shalom, lest the eunuch should be put to shame. Ye see, therefore, my children, what great things I endured, that I should not put my brethren to shame. Do ye also, therefore, love one another. Love one another. Indeed, you cannot love one another. We cannot love one another if we don't have meekness and humility. Do ye also, therefore, love one another, and with long suffering, this is fruit, this is the fruit of the root, hide ye one another's faults. Indeed, love covers a multitude of crime. Love covers a multitude of crime. Do ye also, therefore, love one another with long suffering, hide ye one another's fault. And indeed, we cannot love one another unless we are meek and lowly and humble. For Elohim delighteth in the unity of brethren, and in the purpose of a heart that takes pleasure in love. And when my brethren came into Egypt, they learned that I had returned their money unto them, and unbraided them not, and comforted them. And after the death of Jacob, my father, listen, and after the death of Jacob, Yaqub, my father, I loved them more abundantly, and all things whatsoever he commanded, I did very abundantly for them. And I suffered them not to be afflicted in the smallest matter, and all that was in my hand I gave unto them. And their children were my children, and my children as their servants. And their life was my life, and all their suffering was my suffering, and all their sickness was my infirmity. My land was their land, and their counsel my counsel. And I exalted not myself among them in arrogance because of my worldly esteem, but I was among them as one of the least. If ye also, therefore, walk in the commandments of Yahuwah, my children, he will exalt you there. He will exalt you there. We must walk as meek and humble servants like our father Yahushua, and he will exalt us. This is the only way back to the throne. This is the way in which Yahushua has shown us. This is the way in which Yahushua himself has shown us. He will exalt you there and will barak you with good things forever and ever. Indeed, only the meek will inherit the earth. And if anyone seeketh to do evil unto you, do well unto him and pray for him, and you shall be redeemed of Yahuwah from all evil. For behold, you see that out of my humility, ye see that out of my humility and long suffering, I took unto wife the daughter of the priest of Heliopolis, and 100 talents of gold were given me with her, and Yahuwah made them to serve me. And he gave me also beauty as a flower beyond the beautiful ones of Yasha'al. And he preserved me unto old age in strength and in beauty, because I was like in all things to Yaqub. He was humble. He was humble. He was humble. And hear ye, my children, also the vision which I saw. There were 12 hearts feeding, and the 9 were first dispersed over all the earth, and likewise also the 3. And I saw that from Yahudah was born a virgin wearing a linen garment, and from her was born a lamb, and from her was born a lamb without spot. And on his left hand there was as it were a lion. And all the beasts rushed against him, and the Lamb overcame them, and destroyed them, and trod them underfoot. And because of him, the messengers and men celebrated in all the land. And these things shall come to pass in their season in the last days. Do ye therefore, my children, observe the commandments of Yahuwah, and honor Louis and Yahudah. For from them shall arise unto you the Lamb of Elohim, the Lamb of Elohim, the meek and humble and lowly Lamb of Elohim, who taketh away the crime of the world, who saveth all the Gentiles and Yashar'al. For in his reign, in his kingdom, is an everlasting kingdom, a reign which shall not pass away. But my reign among you shall come to an end as a watcher's hammock, which after the summer disappeareth. For I know that after my death that the Egyptians will afflict you, but Elohim will avenge you, and will bring you into that which he promised to your fathers. But you shall carry up my bones with you, for when my bones are being taken up thither, Yahuwah shall be with you in light, and Beliar, which is to say wickedness, shall be in darkness with the Egyptians. And carry you up Asenath, your mother, to the hippodrome, and near Rachel, Rachel, your mother, buried her. And when he had said these things, he stretched out his feet and died at a good old age. And all Yashar'al mourned for him, and all Mashraim with a great mourning. And when the children of Yashar'al went out of Egypt, they took with them the bones of Yahusha. They buried him in Hebron with his fathers, and the years of his life were 110 years. Indeed, Mashpaka, through meekness, gentleness, humility, submission, and service, which are all synonymous, we will ascend to the throne, to the reign with Yahuwah. In other words, this is how Yahuwah will exalt us. Only he will be above us. As only Par'ah was above Yahusha, only Yahuwah is going to be above us. This is the example. As Par'ah alone was above Yahusha, only Yahuwah is going to be above us. Yahusha being Yashar'al, he being the firstborn, serving out the rebellion, serving as a servant, and after serving the period of rebellion, after submitting himself to the judgment, was exalted to the throne. Only Par'ah's throne was higher than his. Indeed, only Yahuwah's throne is going to be higher than ours, if we operate as meek and humble and lowly servants, if we operate as sheep. This is the hidden meaning in Yahusha. The completeness of the nations. Indeed, Ephraim is the completeness of the nation. He is the firstborn son. This is the hidden meaning in Yahusha, the completeness of the nations. Indeed, only the meek will inherit the earth. Only the meek will inherit the earth. So again, indeed, Mashpaka, let's talk about fruit. Let's talk about fruit. Humility is the key to all things. Humility is the key to being exalted back to the throne. Humility is the key. Only the meek will inherit the earth. In the end, he's going to separate sheep and goats. Either we are sheep or we are goats. Either we are a meek and humble and submissive and obedient sheep, or we are a prideful and stiff-necked and disobedient goat, a hard to manage goat. There is no in between. There is no in between. So Abba has sent me by to cause us to take a heart check, to make a heart check, to take an introspective look at our hearts, and to make sure that we have hearts of humility, and to make sure that we are operating in meekness and in humility, so that we are certain that we are sheep. Because this is the fruit of a sheep. The fruit of a sheep is the fruit of the root, which is founded and laid upon the foundation of humility. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. Thank you, Abba, for giving your son the strength to once again bring forth your word, to bring forth this teaching. I pray, Abba, that it cut. I pray that it has not fallen void to the ground. I pray that it would cause your children to take an introspective look at themselves and to ensure that they're operating in meekness and humility, to ensure that they are operating within the confines of your Ruach, because this is evidence. This is the evidence that we have your Ruach when we operate in meekness and humility. So I pray, Abba, that if some in this mishpachah do not have meekness and humility, that they will cry out to you unlike ever before, that they will cry out to you for meekness and humility, that they will cry out to you for your Ruach. Because when your true Ruach comes, he brings meekness and humility. We cannot help but operate in meekness and humility when your Ruach comes. It does not mean, as your servant Joseph spoke, it does not mean that we don't struggle with envy and pride. It does not mean that we don't struggle with things. But it does mean that if we have a meek and humble heart, that you will deliver us from these things, that you will save us from these things. So it is my prayer, Abba, that you fill us, your children, with more and more and more meekness and humility, such that it is pouring out of our pores. It is pouring out of every pore in our body. Fill us, Abba, with more meekness and humility. Fill us, Abba, with more love and patience and kindness and goodness and self-control. Fill us, Abba, with more trustworthiness, with more gladness, with more gentleness, with more shalom. Fill us, Abba, with the fruit of righteousness that leads to everlasting life. Fill us, Abba. Please fill us, your children, so that we reflect your very nature and your very character, because we understand that you too are meek and humble and lowly. I pray that this word has not fallen by the wayside. I pray that it has not fallen amongst stony ground. I pray that it has not fallen amongst thorns, but that it has fallen on fertile soil, so that it grows up after being watered by your Ruach, so that it grows up to a mighty tree, producing the fruit that leads to everlasting life. And the Basham of Yahusha, HaMashiach, so be it, so be it, so be it. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah. Barak Yahuwah.